Bonjour, bonsoir, dear friends. Welcome to JCB Live Happy Hour. Today we're going to be with one of the most unique, exceptional, visionary of Napa Valley. I cannot tell you how excited I am because he's next to me. I could feel his positive and constructive energy because he's built the system of Appellation in Napa Valley. He's written many books. He's an incredible author. He's a fabulous artist, sculpture, very large. He is a big-time lawyer. I never spend too much time on the fact that you're a lawyer, but we will a little bit today for his great achievement. And as well, we'll say for the end of the interview, he's done something very unique in his life that many of us want to do and we never dare doing. I won't tell you what it is because we will save it till the end of the interview. So to make sure that Richard Mendelson himself comes in, he's going to come in through the sound of the music of wine. Woo! Voilà!
Voilà.
So Richard.
Merci.
C'est un plaisir. So welcome to JCB Live.
Thank you.
We're so
pleasure
honored
to be
have
here.
you.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much. So Richard, the tradition, we got to taste it. And dear friends, a very unique moment because Richard came to wine through an amazing moment of his life. So maybe we start there. How did you get your passion for wine?
I was not a wine drinker growing up in Florida, nor was I a wine drinker when I was at college. But when I moved for a graduate degree, actually to Oxford in England, underneath my college, modeling college, was one of the largest cellars in all of continental Europe. Underneath every building of the university was the wine cellar.
Really?
And
at Oxford, I visited the cellar, but just one side of it. I didn't know all the buildings were dedicated.
All the buildings
wines.
of my college, modeling college, underneath them you go down to the wine cellar, pipes of port, wines going back, and they were made available to students at the original cost plus 6%. Not 6% per annum, the original cost plus 6%.
This is amazing. So
I arrived
affordable.
And thought, I don't know much about wine, but I've got 2 years here, and I'm going to drink through the wine list. Your access to the wine list depended on the length of your gown. If you were an undergrad, the gown came to waist high. If you were a graduate student like me, it came to thigh high. So I had, but then the dons, the professors with the long gowns,
which you are now too,
which I am now, had complete access to the cellar. But it was an amazing experience.
But you still have 3/4 access because your skirt was going at the knee level.
Exactly it. And it was a wonderful experience, and I got hooked.
So what's your most? I mean, can you believe you go to graduate school, you have access to a historical cellar? That's a good start. What's your most incredible memory there?
Oh, I think the best memory was that the president of the college, who used to be the wine steward,
yes,
he would throw a party every Thanksgiving for the American students. There weren't that many of us who were in college, and he would pull out the stops. So Thanksgiving was a feast.
Wow.
We would usually bring in venison that were growing right on the college
That's right.
lawns, and he was really a fan of German wines,
yes,
of ports,
yes,
and then Burgundy.
Aha!
In that order.
That leads to something else. But, and it goes throughout your life because I got the pleasure to get to know Richard for many years, and he's extremely well known in the world of wine, not just in Napa Valley, but everywhere. So you're an entrepreneur in a way that you don't mind going beyond the boundaries for education, as an example. What drove you to go from Florida to your undergrad to graduate in the UK?
I like to be on the steep part of the learning curve.
Yes.
And if I'm not on the steep part of the learning curve, I get a little bored.
Wow.
So I search out things that are, one, I'm passionate about. If I don't care about it, I'm not going to jump in all the way.
Yes.
And then I go for it. And it just so happened that wine came up at that time of my life when I really was ready for it, and it's remained a constant ever since.
So did that influence you to cross the French Channel? I don't call it the English Channel anymore,
No.
And to actually go to Burgundy?
I was a Francophile. To get my education in wine, not only did I drink through the cellar, but I did the Wine and Spirit Education Trust course in London.
Wow.
And then I had a credential and I wanted a job. And frankly, I wanted to move to France. I was learning the language. I loved France from day one. And I was lucky enough to land a job in Burgundy, as you well know.
A lovely little region. You should all come and see us. But that's amazing. So you finished the law degree.
It wasn't a law degree.
Oh, it was.
My undergrad was they call it PPP, Philosophy, Politics, and Economics.
Great. And then you went back to the U.S.
And then came back for law school.
And when did you go there?
Stanford. To be close to the grapes.
Of course. Well, we brought a surprise for you because the JCB 69 is 100% Pinot. But we understand there's maybe a very special memory right here, dear friends, in those very same cellar before I got to know those cellars. I think Richard did know them better than me.
Yes, indeed.
So you went to Burgundy. How did that happen? Because this is a fascinating story as well.
I loved Burgundy wines. And cheers.
See the solemnity of the cheer, the moment of silence. Did you see the Wine and Spirit Educational Trust taught him well? His nose, the sound, the vibration, and the wines.
And the memories. Just that label. So, I was lucky enough to get a job in the wine industry in France after my time in England. And it was at Bouchard Aîné, with Paul Bouchard was my patron. Sure. And I worked closely with him. I would entertain all of our overseas trade buyers. I'd take them around to all of our vineyards, lead tastings, and then Paul would come in with me for the closing. Sometimes we'd go out to Larmas, his home in Larmas, for that. And I just had a great year at Bouchard Aîné. I learned so much. I loved the wines. I loved the countryside. And I learned inside out the Appellation system because I had to explain it.
That's right.
To the people who were coming there to learn about it.
And was it very complicated for you to grasp at first?
No, I loved it. The thing I've always loved about wine is that it's tied to the land, and to understand it, you make great wine in the vineyard. You have to start with the land, and so I had a real appreciation. I've always had a scientific bent. I love soil science and hydrology and all the things that. Geology, all the things that make wine special, the terroir. I learned in France. Little did I know what was happening in the wine industry in America because I hadn't come back. But I got a real education and took an interest in the history of appellations in France. So I really dug in and learned it pretty well.
The 735 different vineyard designates. Good luck, dear friends. I bet you Richard knows about 734.
No, I do this with Psalms all the time. I ask them, we have American viticultural areas, as you know. How many of the 400, 300 can you name?
Yes.
And very few can get many of them.
And I'm born and raised in Burgundy, studied it carefully, jogged in probably every single vineyards you could think of. And I still probably know not even half of them. So it tells you that one and again and so often you discover a new appellation or vineyard designate. So for you, it's a little Savigny des Beaunes, which is a vineyard you probably remember.
Yes, of course.
Owned by Bouchard,
right.
In that entrance of the magical town of Beaune. So maybe you describe it into a few words, because Richard, and I was saying that for all of you now, is as well a winemaker and has his own wine we're going to be tasting shortly too.
I love the crisp acidity. It's got a minerality to it, but it's earthy. It's earthy, easy to drink. Very, very, very nice presentation. The wine's got a nice texture and nice acidity.
Thank you so much. And that's the beauty of Burgundy specifically. You know, we thought 2015, not that young, but really starting to be on that secondary, you know, evolution, which is really what you want in whites. Never drink them too early, you know, because they want to open up like a red wine.
And then, of course, that distinctive label. The thing about the Bouchardonnay wines that I always loved, that vertical strip, which has to be very difficult. It was difficult for us to apply.
Yes.
It must be difficult
Still
for you.
today.
Yes, but it's so distinctive. I don't know of any other wine that has that distinctive package.
And you know what I believe is one of the first major house selling wine to the U.S. at the turn of the previous century, meaning the 19th century, as you know, and as well one of the first winery to have the wines on the QE2 on the famous, you know, famous trip that the Queen of England took, and that was the wine of choice. So always close to America in many ways.
Yes. Yes.
And now, so you learn this appellation system. You come back to Stanford, you become a lawyer, and then what happens? You come to Napa and you fall in love?
I came to Napa as soon as I came back from France. I had been accepted to law school before I went to Europe.
Yes.
That was on the East Coast at Yale. I met my wife to be in France. She's
That's
also
right.
a Francophile and a Francophile.
You met her in a Burgundy cellar, right?
I met her in the Burgundy cellar.
Marilyn, as you're watching
Yes,
tonight,
here's to you,
congratulations.
Marilyn.
And congratulations for staying together so long.
Yes,
because
indeed. 40 years this year.
40 years.
Yes, yes.
Well, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So you meet her in the cellars in France, then you...
Met her. We decided we could have gone to Australia. Then we weren't sure what we were going to do at the end. We decided to come to the States, and we crossed the country. I'm a native Floridian. We took our time, and it was her first time in the States, and we came out to California. And actually, I was offered a job. I wasn't sure whether I was going to go to law school or work in the wine industry.
Really?
And I was offered a job by Gallo.
Oh.
That was a very enticing job. I didn't take it because I wasn't sure I wanted to live in Modesto. I just didn't know. But it was 1979 was the year they were releasing their first table wines, their first varietal
wines. Yes.
And I was offered a job to help them with that launch of the varietal wine program. And I decided not to take it. My wife decided not to go to the East Coast, so I applied to Stanford Law School, decided it was time to finish my education, and I thought I was leaving the wine industry behind when I enrolled at Stanford.
But you never did.
I never did.
So you opened the office, of course, of a famous law firm here in Napa.
It was open before me. I joined the law firm. Yes.
And then tell us what you've created, because I really think, dear friends, you got to realize Richard took the roots of Burgundy to heart in many ways and helped create the appellation system we have in Napa Valley. So, Richard, tell all our guests all about this, because this is a major deal.
Well, just to put it in historical context, the 1976 Paris tasting that Steve Spurrier put together, that Chateau Montelena and Stag's Leap wine cellars were victorious at, really catapulted in a large sense Napa Valley wines, because it gave them this sense of place, this pride of place. And more people started to put Napa Valley on their wine labels, and even smaller areas within it. But there was no formal appellation system. They were using the name. Napa Valley had no definition. So we needed to almost backfill with an appellation system. And everything in life is timing. It's passion, it's timing. And I happened to come here right at the time when this was happening.
That's
and
amazing.
I had the background. I knew the history of French appellations. I could participate in the setting up the framework for our United States appellation system, and then have the good fortune of working with so many great people in the valley, because they were Vintner grower groups to actually form the appellation.
So you help as well the U.S. system.
I did. Yes, I was actually working at the Wine Institute then. During law school, I worked part of the time at the Wine Institute, and after I graduated, so I kept the wine.
close to you.
It's in your blood. You can't get it out.
It's part
right?
of your DNA. Then.
It's part of your
I'm not
DNA.
calling it an addiction because it's a very noble engagement.
It's a love. It's
exactly.
a love. So, yes, I took part in the creation of the system. I followed that, weighed in on it, and then was able to be actively involved in the appellations as they formed.
And how did your Burgundy experience help you to create that?
Well, first of all, to understand the relationship between growers and vintners, that a true appellation to work well has to have both involved.
That's right.
It might be led, as many of our appellations were, by wineries, but you need the grower involvement and buy-in. So I knew what it took, not just to form an appellation, but to have the foundation that would lead to success.
That's it. Yeah.
Post-formation.
That's it.
As many of our appellations have
Because many
done.
could falter and many could not be recognized as great as they should be.
And that is unfortunately the case with many of our, not in Napa, but elsewhere, they've fallen by the wayside.
That's right.
Died on the vine.
Mm-hmm.
So I think first of all is the involvement, and then also the what is it that makes up terroir?
That's right.
What are the aspects of viticulture and
so
of the site?
Of the site.
Of the site.
What did you list as the key parameters to be able to say, this is going to be Stag's Leap, this is going to be Oakville, this is going to be Rutherford?
Good question. I think first of all, we wanted a system that was understandable to consumers from top to bottom. And fortunately, Napa Valley, when you're just driving through Napa Valley, you understand its basic geomorphology.
For sure.
You see the valley cut by the river. You see the Mayacamas Range on the west side. You see the Vaca Range on the east side. You see the marine influence dissipating as you go north.
That's right.
You'll see the fog right around your home.
That's
know that it ends
yes.
In the morning, and then the wind that comes up in the afternoon, and the different aspect and elevation, slight elevation rise. So I wouldn't say that it was. It's something that evolved. We didn't have it right at the outset, and it was controversial. I mean, many of our appellations were people had strong views about names and about boundaries. But I think over time we evolved into a system that's both viticulturally meaningful, understandable to consumers, and allows them to do what hooked me right from the get-go when I was at the Wine and Spirit Education Trust. One of the first classes, they showed a table, and it was called the naming of wine.
That's it. Yeah.
And for example, it was France, and it was Bordeaux and Burgundy, the regions, Alsace, and then you could go all the way down to the
village.
To the village. And I thought that system affords the consumer the ability to enter at whatever level they want.
Yes.
And compare and contrast and learn, and it's a lifelong, call it a game, a love, an inquiry, and I think we built that.
So you've used basically the same framework, and then you go into the village. The village represents the appellation, so Yonville, Oakville. It's Rutherford, San Helena, Calistoga, etc.
Correct, and then obviously for those of us who are amateur, connoisseur, we go to the vineyard and to the block and all the other levels of detail.
We're not going to the row yet, but
not yet.
Maybe soon.
Not yet.
But that's amazing. So how do you define the amount of acreage and the limits on one side to the other of the appellation? Because, dear friends, what amazes me always is I'm not a monk, but I've admired the monks forever, who really predefined, Burgundy as we know it today, and they really observe nature and define Clos Vougeot.
Yes.
Prime example by them purely.
Yes.
Echezo.
And I'm so glad you said observe nature. That it really is an observation and an investigation. We've learned a lot. In the early days, we were, let's just say, on the parameter of climate.
Yes.
We were dealing with regions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the Winkler system, and it was very gross level distinctions.
That's right.
Now every vineyard has has its own weather station. We have so much data. We know so much more. And I'd say over time we've become more and more sophisticated, along with what we learn as farmers and as winemakers. So it's this collective knowledge put together, and it's not one parameter. Well, the beauty of it is it's not one parameter. It's a mélange. It's an assemblage, just like a wine would be.
And how far do you think it's going to go? Now we have 16 AVAs, which are very clearly defined, you know, from the entrance of Napa Valley, following the geography, as you said, the geomorphology of the area. How far do you think we should go?
Well, I think we should, and I say this in my book, Appellation, Napa Valley.
I want to make sure we present.
Well, the end of the book suggests that we really need to define where our vineyards are.
Yes.
We can't leave it to anyone individually to change what a vineyard is from day one to day two. We should at least have a registry. We started with a registry of the grape growers of Napa Valley have started with a registry of historic vineyards.
Great.
But we really need to take that farther, and we need some rules of the game. And because this is important to critics, it's important to consumers. Where are the vineyards that are designated on a label? So I think we should go to that step, and I wouldn't mind seeing Napa Valley being at the forefront of that, be the pioneer.
Yes, in the United States.
In the United States. Let's do it for our valley.
Yeah.
And because we have a lot of historic vineyards,
absolutely,
we can start with those.
And Mr. Galloni has done a great job.
He's done a great job.
So it's a good start to maybe use what he's done. But show us this incredible book, Richard, that you so kindly made for Napa Valley and the future of Napa. Because when you create a book, it's not for yourself. It's as well for, more importantly, others.
It's for the history. I was lucky enough to be directly involved with some wonderful people and live through the creation of this part of Napa Valley's history. And I thought, while I have my wits about me, it needs to be told. The story needs to be told. So it's a first-person account of not all the appellations that I was involved in, but the major ones that set some of the principal tenets.
Yes.
And the book has maps throughout, showing the areas. I'll just give you an example.
And you have his beautiful beginning at Bouchard.
Yes, beautiful. Starts at Bouchard. It was a fun book, and it gets right into the details of the map.
But this is fascinating. Richard, a few years ago, offered me this beautiful book, and it's become literally a Bible for me to really understand the appellation, because the wine world is as winemakers, we live through maps, and thanks to maps, right?
Absolutely.
In Burgundy, in my car, I have the Poupon book, which is every single AVA, every single village to the row. And you want to go to the road to really understand every detail.
Yes, it was a fun book to write. It gets into not just appellations, but it's called Building and Protecting an American Treasure, because we've done a lot of other very special things in Napa, from the Ag Preserve of 1968, one of the first in America to really protect the farmland and prevent Napa Valley from being the next Silicon Valley, just paved over with buildings.
Yes.
That was a historic move. That was another pioneering effort. And I think it's been followed by land use policies that have really served Napa Valley very well. So I tell everything that, in my experience, led to this creation of this American treasure.
Yes. So what would you like people to remember from this book and from your involvement within the appellation system?
Oh, I think first and foremost, you, me, and everyone else in the Valley, we come here because of a really fantastic history and a lot of amazing people, starting with the immigrants in the mid-1800s who fled Europe and with their dreams and their fortunes and came here to create what we have in Napa Valley. And we kind of live on their shoulders, and we keep trying to make things better for our kids and the next people who follow us in Napa Valley. And I think this is just a little slice of that history of special people with special dreams, working hard to really make Napa Valley what it is today, or as one person said on the back of my book, we were talking about this before the interview, Cucho Huneeus, Augustin Huneeus of Quintessa, in the wine world, everyone wants to be like Napa. How did that happen?
Very true. Yeah.
It was
thanks to those efforts.
It was all the work of many people over successive generations.
And a short period of time in many ways. 1850 was when Krug came here, after Buena Vista, by the way, which we'll try shortly. And then it started, but it really started in the 60s and 70s.
It started to come from the ashes of Prohibition,
Yeah.
which is the other book that I've written, only because it answers this story. This was the story, really. I wrote this book. This was my first book. It's called From Demon to Darling, how Napa went from, or how wine went from being the demon in American society, and from the ashes of Prohibition became the darling.
Yes.
And really, it's a story of, again, people, technology also.
Yes.
The role of UC Davis, and and really being able to, after 13 years of not producing anything other than sacramental wines,
Yes.
To be able to come to where we have in that short a period of time. This book I wrote really for my law clients.
Really?
No one could understand, particularly coming from abroad, why, when they want to enter into the wine industry in America, why their fingerprints are taken and they're run through the Department of Justice.
It's a strange feeling, dear
It's
friends.
a strange.
They have my fingerprints.
They have JCB's fingerprints, and why? And frankly, none of my clients could ever understand
That's true.
the patchwork of crazy rules governing alcohol in America, which all are relics of Prohibition. So this is a book about how, from colonial times, the first aspirations for wine back in the 1700s to today,
yeah.
this arc of demon to darling.
I cannot wait to read.
It's a fun read.
And dear friends, we're going to have all those books, and there's one more we'll save for the end that is available through our salon, and as well we're going to give you Richard Mendelson's direct information so you can order those books. Really, really recommend reading about wine, because wine is not just about drinking, it's as well about reading and being educated with the culture that goes around wine.
Correct.
So not only Richard, very successful lawyer, as you could see, an amazing writer, is a vintner. So I believe, Richard, you need to tell us.
I'll tell you this story with pleasure. I want you to taste it. This is a old world Crimean wine. This is where my family came from, my ancestors. The Crimea. Crete. This is a wine that I discovered in the cellars of Massandra when I was there as a U.S. delegate to a wine convention in 1989. And I found these unctuous, fantastic fortified dessert wines.
Wow.
Being made in cement vats. And this was the era in the Soviet Union, because it was the time of the Soviet Union still, when Gorbachev was trying to deal with alcoholism by raising vineyards.
That's
and
right.
I thought this historic wine was going to disappear. And I love history, just like you do. I know you do as well.
Passionate about it.
And I wanted to save this piece of history that was also where my family came from, and I loved the wine.
And makes so much sense to do.
And so I came back and planted my vineyard.
So this is actually coming from your own estate right here in Napa Valley.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yes. I planted my vineyard to Pinot Gris, and really it wasn't until several years later that I made my first fortified dessert wine, and this is now a non-vintage. It's really like a Solera system. It's a blend of barrels going back to when I started in 1994.
And how long is the process of vinification and aging here?
We made this wine at the outset, and we also have a second wine of this ilk. It's a muscat canelli.
Mm-hmm.
And we made them to be drunk in their youth to show off their fruitiness. So we kept them lower in alcohol in terms of fortification level, and we'd vinify and we would have it out in the market by within a year. We didn't age them for that long, but all along the way I was holding back barrels because you know the Aussies make stickies that they leave in the barrels for a long, long time. So we didn't make this wine until we were 15 years into the program when we went back to those barrels and saw that it was developing a tawny character.
For sure, it is.
It is, and in a way that I thought was beautiful.
Did it remind you of some of what you've tasted in those Oxford cellars?
It reminded me of what I tasted in the cellars of Massandra, where these wines come from.
We're born.
And we were fortunate enough, my wife and I, to taste examples of this that were 150 years old that were like tea.
Yes.
Sitting on a bed of alcohol.
That's
it was just the most fantastic.
And the amount of alcohol here is
this has about
20.
No, 14.
14.
Yeah,
and the
14.
residual sugar is 20.
Yes.
This is spectacular.
Yeah.
So just before we started the show, Richard allowed us to purchase some of his wines for the Oakville wine merchant. So we delighted, dear friends. Not only you can get it directly with Richard, but we will be able to serve this historical wine from Napa Valley. And wouldn't you be the only one to do it?
I'm the only one making this. Only one crazy enough to make a fortified dessert wine.
I love it. And dessert wines are way underrated.
And as you know, in France, where you would drink this when you come in as an aperitif.
That's right.
Right? I mean, we don't do that here.
And could we change that trend?
Well, I'd love to. Part of it is, I put on my legal hat, the class and type of this wine is a dessert wine. It is a dessert wine.
Yes.
But it really needs another name. And you're not allowed to call these wines fortified wines in America. It goes back to the crazy patchwork of American laws, because either people think, the government thinks it's either fortified with vitamins and you haven't told me what vitamins are in there, or they think it's fortified with alcohol and it might be dangerous to your health.
Yeah.
So they won't let you use the word fortified.
That's really too bad.
Yeah, because it is a fortified
then
wine.
we would have it as a non-dessert, which I think is where it belongs.
Like a vendange tardive.
Fantastique.
Yeah, fantastique.
Yeah. So, writer, obviously a vintner, now lawyer. What is the most exciting thing to do as a lawyer in the wine world? If there's one thing we need to remember, that why a lawyer could be beneficial to our life, number one, and I'm not Marilyn, married to you for 4 years, so I'm not going to go on the emotional side, but the law of wine and so forth, because I think it's important to bring a certain amount of regulations to wine, and it is essential.
There's no question about that.
So I see the benefits. Of course.
I have a broader perspective on this subject because I'm not doing day-to-day lawyering anymore, but I think law is a true service calling and is an important way of serving people.
Yes.
And people in the wine industry are so amazing with their artistic interests, and they come with from so many backgrounds, that to be able to help someone navigate what is a very complicated world, from taxation to labeling to packaging to distribution, import, export. So just to have the knowledge to help people in their journey. I didn't realize when I was a lawyer how important that was. It took me getting out of law and going into art as a creator of wine, creator of art, then appreciate being a service provider. And now I teach wine law at Berkeley. I run the wine law program at UC Berkeley.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
and I say congratulations because we need very strict and disciplined lawyer to make sure the wine world is well governed.
We do, and
well organized. I think it's important.
And we need young lawyers coming into into the industry. So I'm able to hopefully impart some knowledge to young people entering the industry. And the wine, it's a very popular course. We do tastings, of course, and people just love the product the same way I did.
That's right. And now explain to everyone, because during this time of reflection, a lot of us have been at home for 7 months. A lot of people are reassigning their priorities, are relooking at their lives. You've done that many times in your life.
Yes.
And you not only do law today, you do mergers and acquisition,
I do.
real estate. Explain how you would advise everyone to branch out from the core of what they do? Because I think you're really the expert at that.
Well, I mean, I've lived my life that way, but you know, in a sense, wine has been at the center of it all. Certainly, the branching out from doing law to doing mergers and acquisitions I was brought there by my clients because they trusted me, and you know, this is a business that it's started in the 60s, you know, and really got going, and there's been a certain amount of succession and sales that have occurred, and I've been fortunate enough to be part of that, and very happy when we bring in people to the Valley like yourself who are here for all the right reasons and gonna elevate again Napa Valley to the next higher level. So I think you know, that's first of all, that's incredibly important, and then wine's about passion.
Yeah.
And you know, when I started doing art, I thought, are my clients what are they gonna think? I was then a full-on practice. You know, that was my life, and you know, what are people gonna think if I start making metal sculptures? And I only got encouragement. You know, people who live their life with passion will encourage other people to live their lives that way. And then it's not work.
So you follow your passion?
It's pleasure. Yes, I follow my passion.
So you followed it professionally and artistically?
Yes, I did.
So how did you get to start? And maybe we should taste.
Yes.
Now, maybe I'm going to ask you to finish maybe your... I know your Burgundy, it's not too hard to finish. It's a big glass, but we should go on something very artistic as well. And so we've had the wonderful Mendelson. Now we're going to try Buena Vista Tokai Azul, 2008. And I believe we have 6 putoños on this wine.
Fantastic.
And we make it in partnership with our friend in Hungary. And we're very proud to promote Hungary. You know, it's bottled there.
A historic...
The founder of Buena Vista being Hungarian.
Yes, wonderful. Cheers.
So to your art, another artistic creation by the Hungarian who really set the path of incredible, you know, as we could call it, dessert wine or...
unctuousness, texture, just beautiful. Beautiful, still got great acidity. That's lovely.
Thank you.
These wines
I love them.
What together. Is he? That's 10.5 alcohol.
Yep, 10.5.
I love a little bit of alcohol in the dessert wine to clean the palate at the end of a for both for food and otherwise.
Indeed.
It's got just enough.
So, Richard, how do we become an artist?
It's a great story. It's one of the great stories of my life, really, and I have to pay tribute to a local...
That's his third or fourth life already. Can you imagine?
Well, this was one of these fortuitous things in your life. Jack Chandler, who's a famous sculptor and landscape designer, now deceased, unfortunately, he was one day in front of the Napa Valley Planning Commission, and I was in the seated. I had the next matter. And I didn't really know him. I'd met him once or twice, and he got up to the podium.
But you knew the sculpture.
I knew generally I knew him more as a landscape person. Okay. I didn't at that time know about sculpture. And he was stumbling at the podium. He didn't have his act together.
Yeah.
And so he took a recess, took a break, and I went out in the hallway, and I just said, look, this is what I think you should do. Just pointers. And he went in and he did, and it worked out well, and he invited me to lunch. So I went up to his house in Calistoga. We're having a nice lunch, and he says, would you like to look around my house? And I did. And we went out into the backyard, which sculptors, we call a boneyard. It was just full of raw steel and junk.
Yeah.
And he just looked at me, and he said, do you want to do this? Somehow he saw what I didn't see. I mean, now looking back, I can see the antecedents. I remember as a kid, you know, I can see where the roots were, but I had never done art. And I said, yes, I want to do this. And he said, come up on Friday. You can work with Miguel, was then his welder. He's now my welder. And I went there on Friday. I drew exactly what I wanted to make, and I came home.
Was it
with
the
a
sphere
sculpture
within the triangle?
No, it wasn't that yet. I made a sculpture. It was a figurative piece, And I remember bringing it home that day. And he said, you can do it again. Come up every Friday.
Wow.
So I brought it
Great
home.
invitation.
Great invitation.
Chandler, yes.
And then I thought, you know, as a lawyer, I never made any. I helped people, but I never made anything. I've got something I made.
Yeah.
And so I worked for 3 months at his every Friday. And then finally, like any good mentor would do, he said, get out of here. It's time for you to go learn your craft. Go. Fly, bird.
Do it yourself.
Do it yourself. So I went and I learned to weld, and I have been at it ever since. And he just gave me a gift because he saw something that I didn't see.
And how many years has it been now?
That was in 1994. So I've been at it for 26 years.
And you have
now.
your atelier at your house?
I do design work all over,
Yes.
and then I've worked with the same crew for a very long time, and it takes a crew. You know,
For
they're
sure.
welders, they're sandblasters, they're painters, they're haulers, and you know everything else that you need to do metal work.
That's amazing.
And it's just been
So explain the
treat.
style, because I'm very familiar with it now. So big structures.
Well, big and small. But big and small. I do welded steel. I'm not
Yes.
I don't cast.
Yes.
I'm not using foundries. I'm doing steel, Corten steel, raw steel, stainless steel. I started out doing a lot of figurative work because I've always been interested in movement and dance and yoga. And more recently, I'm into abstract work, and it's just, and and now I do primarily for commission.
And you sell a lot of your pieces,
yes.
which is amazing. Is everything Richard touches, he's successful, from law to obviously wine to sculpture. And there's another topic I really want to go into, which is, I hope you're going to be okay with it. But before we go there, describe the sculpture you sent me the other day and the image of that incredible piece, the sphere within the triangles,
yes.
which has, I think, a lot of meaning from, hidden symbolism.
Yes, I've gone more recently into sacred art.
That's right.
Sacred symbology. And a lot of that comes out of my interest in Hinduism and in yantras.
Yeah.
So a yantra, for anyone who does meditation, if you use a sound, which is a mantra, every mantra, every sound has a representation in figure, in a figurative form as well, encapsulating space, how you enclose space, and that sacred space. And so some of my recent work is about those yantras. Usually they have a representation in a deity. So they represent the divine, some aspect of the divine. So I've been, a lot. The one that you saw was we call a Kali yantra, and it was a big circle with an upside down triangle, and then a ball in the middle that's on right smack dab in the middle, and that's encapsulating that space. In fact, some sculptures we make, like a Sri yantra, we can also use for meditation. You can start at the outset when you're outside, and you can, in your mind's eye, while you're meditating, go to the central point, which is called the Bindu.
The Bindu.
And that's when you're at the height of your meditative state. So it combines a lot of things for me.
But that's phenomenal, because you're combining philosophy, spirituality, divinity into your arts.
Yes.
So many people who can see those symbolism, which I did on this specific sculpture, then really can escape into their own journey, which is amazing.
Yes,
so
and we use those as our
meditative piece.
Yes, we use them as meditative tools. Yes.
So, Richard, well, maybe a wine. We're going to have to finish one of our glasses.
Okay. I'm going to have your...
maybe we finish this one.
Yes, we finish this.
It's very hard to have to do that, and we very sorry to all of you with us to finish in front of you. You're going to have to get some Tokai. Now, we thought an all-American cream cherry. We had to recreate, Richard, and we thought it was fun to try this lineup with you, because from your journey to Burgundy, to your fantastic historical wine, to Tokai, and now we're back into the U.S., the iconic one of Buena Vista, cream cherry. So we had to redo it.
Fantastic. Thank you.
And well, we look forward to your comment.
It's got coffee and caramel notes. That is, how would you define a cream sherry?
I'll let you do that.
I don't know that it's defined in the regulations. Sherry certainly is. I don't know that cream is a defined term. How do you define it? I don't think it is.
No, but I love the term because it really represents what we're drinking.
Yes.
So, Richard, big moment in your life, religion.
Yes.
So, if you don't mind us touching briefly on this, because this is not often that we change religion. Often maybe someone does because they get married and they want to be of the same religion. You're born as Jewish, and now you became?
Well, I wouldn't say I am a practitioner of Hinduism because we're members. My wife and I are members of an ashram. I wouldn't say I have not given up my Judaism.
Right. And I don't think you ever do.
Because we don't have to. You never do. You know, it's part of your heritage. But we were fortunate enough in our lives, and this was my wife. You know, as women often bring us to the spiritual.
Very, very importantly to do so.
Yeah, and Marilyn did that with me because she met a guru as part of an ashram, a holy man from India who happens to now be living in the United States in Sonoma, a Sonoma ashram. And we are regular parts of that. We're part of that ashram community, which is based in India, in Varanasi, and also in Sonoma. And it's a tantric tradition. It believes in the divine in everyone. It unlike a lot of Indian philosophy, it believes in, well, for example, some people are trained by sitting in a cremation ground, overcoming your fears.
That's right.
Seeing the divine in everything and everyone, and being a good human being. So we have a very close-knit ashram community. Marilyn and I spend a good deal of time in India at the ashram there, where we do a lot of good works. But I'd say what it's all about is being a good human being.
That's right.
We've learned good values, and we have a good guru, a living guru.
Here in Sonoma,
who's devoted his life to spirituality and is available to us on a regular basis.
And how do you think it has changed your life from your foundation?
Well, you should ask my kids.
Because the Jewish religion is really incredible, and the foundation is one of the most powerful there is.
I'd say it's changed my life, and my kids would say it's changed my life. I'm a nicer person.
Yes.
You know, when you're really busy all the time, and I had a very busy practice, you can get a little short.
Yes.
Either tempered or short with people. I don't do that anymore. I'm a regular meditator. I find my centering spot very easily, and don't get veered off course as readily as I might have in the past.
So your kids would say the same thing?
My kids have said that.
Oh, good.
That's why I know it's true. Because the kids don't lie.
And then, as you can only never do things halfway, you've elected to write a book on the topic.
Well, I'm actually, really exploring the concept of yantras in the sacred. It's the next evolution of my art, because when you can connect different dots, wine connects to a lot of things.
Yes.
But here I'm connecting spirituality to my art, to my meditation practice.
Yeah.
It's a synthesis.
For sure.
And of course, as we get older, we like to see things that are synthesized.
Absolutely. And they all intertwine.
And they all intertwine.
Yeah. As you create art, you meditate.
Correct.
And vice versa.
Correct.
And all of it. So you wrote Spirits
Spirit in Metal is my... this is a very personal book. I actually...
So excited to discover it.
Yeah, it's a quick read, and it's how I came to art and what I've learned from art, and how I create art.
Yes.
And it's my favorite. It's a very personal book. I actually, for quite a while, I refused to sell it because I would give it to people who bought my art or collected it because it's so personal.
For sure.
But it's a good read, and it's a fun book, and it's full of photos of. And this, this
is one of your.
This is the meditating
man,
and here is the woman, sitting in the window.
So as you create, you draw first and then you sculpt.
I draw first and I sculpt, and I've done my best work in France.
Oh, really?
Always. Probably because France, for me, going to Burgundy, was my first real. I was passionate about wine, and I went to another country that I loved. I'm speaking a foreign language, and when I go there, something opens up in me. I still love
your creative chakra.
My creative chakra.
And your third eye of vision.
Yes. India and France.
For sure. But I'm
my
with
favorite
you.
places in the world.
In France, I feel the same. I get to feel very creative somehow.
Yes.
And California has that power as well. Don't you think?
California allows you to, in a way that even France had, if I were, I'd like to turn and interview you now about this, French culture, which can be,
oppressing. For sure.
We're not, in California, it's not an oppressive culture.
That's right.
So there is just like when I started doing art, everybody was encouraging. There's an openness to life in California that I think is unique. And
which I love. Hence,
that's why you're here.
So now, what's your next dream, Richard? Because you've lived 4 or 5 slices of life that are still all intertwined because you do them all. Is there something you want to share that you want to do that you haven't done, as an example?
Well, I think when I step back and look at it, and I was trying to make this point earlier, that the balance between creation and service. Mm-hmm. In our ashram, we talk about seva and sadhana. Sadhana is going inside, and it's meditation and finding your divinity.
Yes.
And seva is about selfless service.
That's right.
And I think of my law work. I'm not desirous to go back and be a practicing lawyer, but service to humanity in whatever way it is. It could be as a lawyer helping people. It could be working the soup line. Selfless service, along with continuing to explore my inner life, is where I'm at right now. Both of those. Try to put them both together.
That's phenomenal. To arrive to that level is fantastic. I'm not there yet. I have many years to go. So, Richard, maybe a last message you want to send to everybody with us?
Well, I'm going to send a message about JCB. I've got the stage. No, you don't have anything to say about it. I've got the stage for a minute. When JCB first came to the Valley, we met. I didn't really get to know you until really fairly recently, and I, you've got an energy and a flamboyance and a passion that's obvious to everyone, that watches this. But what I've learned about you and come to appreciate is that you've got a depth going back, whether it's to your grandmother and what she imparted to you, or your family heritage, that, well, frankly, as your friend, I'd like to explore more, because you've got a lot of deep roots, and they're obvious as I get to know you more. So hopefully they're obvious to everyone who watches.
Well, I'll drink to deep roots.
Yes, let's drink to deep roots.
Well, dear friends,
les racines profondes.
Les racines profondes. Et les racines ont des ailes. And roots have as well wings, which is a famous French show on history and civilization at large. And I think it's very well to do for us, because not only we deep rooted, but we want to escape and still create.
Well said.
Yeah, so
Cheers.
Richard, thank you for joining
Thank you.
us.
Pleasure.
Everybody adored being with you and
Thank you.
cannot wait to discover you more.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup.
De rien.